Oh, I'm so excited to have today's guest on the podcast, Jim Emkhe. I met, oh goodness, a number of years ago. Um, a friend of mine connected me with him, and he is absolutely brilliant when it comes to health and understanding the body. And I would say he's like a health investigator, a scientist of many types, and we've worked through just different, yeah, health like problems and solutions. And I've just been amazed by his wisdom that he's really gathered from across the world and from decades of experience with clients. And so, Jim, welcome to the podcast. Could you start by sharing just a little bit about who you are?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Lauren, for that introduction, and I'm happy to be on the podcast with you today. Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I went to city schools, had a very good family life, two older brothers. I mean, we fought all the time, and sometimes it got ugly, but we hung in there. And my parents were good parents. No, there was no abuse, no alcohol, none of that stuff. In fact, I never heard my parents use the N word or this word. I grew up in an environment that wasn't exactly what I would say idyllic. Who does? But it wasn't caustic either, and it wasn't abusive like so many people have had to deal with. So I've been spoiled that way. I feel very
Mm.
fortunate to have not have to have dealt with some of the things that people deal with when there's a dysfunctional family going on.
Mhm.
And I got interested. My grandparents owned a German bakery, an authentic German bakery. All the recipes were in German and in Milwaukee in those days. And I was born in 1950. So in the 50s and the 60s, neighborhood bakeries were big. My grandparents had a really successful business and, they had, and we all worked there at different times and all the recipes were butter and lard. There was no oil. There was no margarine, but there was a lot of sugar, you know,
Mhm.
and a lot of white flour. And I probably abused it without a doubt. And I was a junk food junkie growing up. Even though my parents tried to get me to eat better, they were like, but I was pretty strong-willed, and there were I would just not, I just wouldn't do it. And no matter how aggressive my dad might have got as far as do it or else, I would take the or else, whatever it is. So I did it to myself, as far as eating poorly because I didn't have to. I had a lot of opportunities to eat good food, and I did eat plenty of good food. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of junk food in there as well. And then I started to get interested in nutrition. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is where I met Karen, my wife, for 49 years.
Wow.
And uh, and Karen was getting her degree in nutritional science. So in Madison was the only school that offered that, and got a master's in nutritional science. And actually, they tried in those days. They had a quota for women in medical school because there were no female doctors. It was
Wow.
rare, very rare.
Wow.
Karen and her genius roommates, because they were like, they were brainiacs. They were told that they wanted them to go to medical school and that they didn't even have to take the med caps. They could just show up and start going, you're in, we know you got the academics, et cetera. But it wasn't Karen's bent to be a doctor. Her dad was an Adele Davis fan. I don't know if you know the word name Adele Davis, but she was a famous nutritionist. She wrote dozens of books, Eat Right, Feed Your Kids Right, that kind of stuff. And she was ahead of the game, way ahead of the game,
Mm.
back in the 40s and the 50s and into the 60s. So she was, and her dad was a big fan of Adele Davis. And consequently, Karen had that bent. So she didn't really want to go to medical school. She wanted to basically work with nutrition. And then she got a job teaching nutrition at the university. She was a nutrition instructor, but that's when she was introduced to you will teach what we tell you to teach, not necessarily what you want to teach. And what we're telling you to teach is food industry nutrition. You're gonna promote all the junk food and all the stuff that the food industry wants you to promote. And Karen just couldn't do it. She did it for a year or two, and she left and started a practice as a dietitian. Well, because she was an MSRD, registered dietitian. But dietitians were not highly regarded. People consider dietitians to be the people that made that really bad hospital food, because in those days,
Yeah.
hospital food was the worst food you could possibly get. And the dietitians, so it was a tough nut to crack to be a private practice. But it was innovative and it showed her courage and her entrepreneur, ism, whatever. But then we studied with Dr. Kelly, and we met Mr. Irons. I mean, we met a lot of people just fell in our laps along the way.
Mm.
And when I was in I was in Madison at the time, but I met Mr. Irons through a friend, V.E. Irons, Victor Earl Irons, veirons.com. And Mr. Irons was like a dynamo. I mean, I'd never met anybody like this in my life. He was like 78 years old when I met him. He looked like he was in his 50s, and he had the energy of a 40, 30. We're just awestruck with Mr. Irons. Moreover, he married his second wife. His first wife died young of pneumonia because, he graduated from Yale in 1919. And we'll just kind of put some dates on this. And he married Julia, his second wife, when he was 72 and she was 28. And they had three kids. And
Wow.
he had his last son when he was 80, Robert. And through a friend, I heard about Mr. Irons and I saw his products. He was the first guy who made a green grass concentrated tablet. He was combining a wheat germ oil with flax oil, so he'd have all the omegas, in one capsule. He had omega sixes and the omega threes, and but he was strictly food based, and so his vitamin C was just pure acerola powder. He didn't care what the potency was, et cetera. But he was a dynamo, the nature of which I'd never met before. When he did die at 98 years of age in a car crash, he had two daughters in their 20s, an 18-year-old son, and a 76-year-old son from his first marriage.
Wow.
Mr. Irons was a man of iron, and he was a man of integrity. He was the kindest, most generous, funniest. He has sense of humor. He lit the place up. Um, I could go on and on telling stories about Mr. Irons. In fact, when I really made a commitment to the whole field, the holistic field, if you will, or the alternative field, um, I was for sure going to follow Mr. Irons' recommendations. And so I got to know him real well, and I started to work for him. For like 10 years, I worked the big health shows in Chicago, National Health Federation. I mean, hundreds of exhibitors, dozens of speakers. I mean, I thought, did we get a land somewhere and we'll drive from Milwaukee to Chicago and this whole thing opens up and we never even knew it existed? Thousands of people coming through. I worked in Chicago, the Los Angeles, and the Washington, D.C., which are the three biggest shows. And I got to know Mr. Irons very well. And I got to introduce him at his talks. And he wanted me to say that he graduated from Yale in 1919 and he graduated from jail in 1959.
Oh gosh.
Because in 1959, the Food and Drug Administration took Mr. Irons to court for in his literature making health claims about fiber. Now,
Mm.
every one of them was true, and there's a lot of science to back it up. Even back in the 50s and 60s, at Burkitt in England, and Anderson at University of Alabama, hardcore scientists were onto the benefits of fiber and all the many benefits of fiber. And they said, well, no, 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 you don't get it, Mr. Irons. The FDA said, it doesn't matter whether it's true. The law in the United States says that you cannot make a health claim about a food. And if you do, you have to apply for a new drug status and spend millions of dollars and all these studies to prove that this is legit. And he's like, no, I don't have to. I've got this. I've got the science. I've got the research. I know I can see these say everything I said about fiber is true. And they go, you're missing the point. And if you don't get the point and change your literature, we're taking you to court for 6 misdemeanors. We got 6 misdemeanors. And
Oh.
Iron said, I told those people I'd see him in hell before I'd sign my name to that pack of lies. That was him. He was fire and brimstone of the old school. And he wouldn't do. They convicted him on 6 misdemeanors and sentenced him to federal penitentiary for a year. That was maximum penalty. And he was actually sat for 6 months in jail and was released on good behavior. And Mr. Irons took it as like a badge of honor. So on his name tag, because he was one of the founding charter members of the National Health Federation, which to this day, without the National Health Federation, none of the supplements that are so commonly and readily available in the United States, all these different things would be available. Because in 1993, the Food and Drug Administration put an order into the Federal Register that all these supplements, 80% of what's in the market would have been taken off the market. So what we did in our clinic is we were turning over like $100,000 worth of supplements a month. And all the health food stores, this was nationwide, put endangered stickers on all these supplements that the FDA was going to remove. Because the FDA has always had an attitude about supplements, because the FDA is beholden to the drug companies
Mm.
and the medical industry. And they've always had this attitude about supplements or alternative approaches, unfortunately, but it is what it is. And so we pushed, and in those days, there was no computers, it was all fax and mail. And
Mm.
so the congressmen and senators were inundated with hundreds of thousands of faxes, and we got a bill sponsored by the National Health Federation called the Dietary Health Supplement Education Act of 1993. It's called DSHEA, for Dietary Health Supplement Education Act. And we had over 270 co-sponsors. We had over 70 in the House and over 70 co-sponsors in the Senate. It was a done deal. It was a slam dunk. Then I realized that this political thing can get pretty weird, because there was a congressman from California, excuse me, Waxman was his name, and he was holding it. He wouldn't put it up for a vote. So one person with all these co-signatures, the people that were co-sponsoring the bill, and finally they had to cut deals with Waxman that the drug companies wanted certain amino acids restricted. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins.
Mhm.
And so they had to cave in and go ahead, and finally got a vote. It was a unanimous voice vote. They didn't even put their names on paper, which kind of bugged me. I would have rather have seen a roll call vote. But this was so overwhelming with co-sponsors, they just said, all in favor, aye, all, they didn't even, it was a voice vote. And Clinton signed it. And that opened up the door, got the FDA out of their draconian attitude about supplements and just refusing to even look at science, and just being basically the police force for the drug companies. So that was done, and that opened up the door. That's why the United States to this day is the clearinghouse for all the supplements in the world, because I was in Switzerland and France years ago, and you couldn't buy. I was with a friend, and he needed some folic acid. I went to the drugstore and I asked for a bottle of folic acid, and you would have thought that like it was E.F. Hutton said, and everybody stopped what they were doing and like, who's this American one? Folic. It was like it's you can't even mail supplements to Europe. You
Mm.
can't. You can mail them to Monaco, that's a free trade zone in France, but you can't mail to France. You can mail to England, even though England has laws forbidding certain supplements, they don't enforce them. Same thing with Canada. There are laws in the books that would really restrict supplements that aren't being enforced. But the DSHEA law of 1993 was the break, and it was all done by the National Health Federation.
Wow.
Yeah, so Mr. Irons wanted me to say he graduated from jail in 1919, Yale in 1919 and graduation. And the people loved it. It brought the house down. It was fire and brimstone in those days. And this was survival, because this was before the DSHEA law, and the old timers, most of them had been to jail. And on Mr. Irons' name tag, it said, V.E. Irons, keynote speaker, founding charter member, National Health Federation, blah, blah, blah. And on the back, he'd always write in red, the jailbird. You know, it's, he was an amazing man,
Mm.
and he knew I was having problems with boils. I mentioned this in our little preliminary talk. So when I hit puberty, I started to have boils. Boils. I was raised Catholic, so I didn't know. We never opened a Bible, of course, because in those days Catholics didn't open Bibles. So I never knew the story of Job, and his run-in with boils. And I never had more than one at a time, but I had some giant boils that drained blood and pus, and it was terrible. And then in the summertime, when my allergies were kicking in, because I had tons of allergies as a kid, the boils would come back with a vengeance.
Mm.
And it was just going on and on and on. And now I'm in my early 20s and I'm still dealing with these allergies and with these boils. It's seasonally worse in the summer, but didn't mean I was immune from getting them in the winter, just not as frequently and not as bad. And so he knew it. He said, I'll tell you what, Jim, he said, if you do my 7-day cleansing program, I guarantee you, if you do it the way you're supposed to do it, that would be 4 times a year, change of the seasons, equinoxes, solstices. You do the 7-day cleansing program, you follow it and you do it. And I guarantee you in 1 year, you'll have no more boils and your allergies will be out of your life. And I was like, Well, that's quite an interesting. The gauntlet is down, because Mr. Irons, he was a man of substance. I mean, so I took it very seriously and I looked it over. Well, what's a 7-day cleansing program? You can see it on veirons.com. You click on products, you click on 7-day cleansing program. It's all spelled out. For 7 days, you do the following. Every day, you take psyllium seed. Mr. Irons at the time was the sole importer of psyllium seed in the United States. That's what Metamucil eventually became the big use of psyllium seed. And you mix it with liquid bentonite, which is a clay like the French clay, but this is a white bentonite clay, which is suspended in colloidal suspension, so you can drink it for the gut. And you do that 4 times a day. So you mix them up in water and chugged it down. I mean, well, it filled you up. It didn't give you the sensation like I ate something, but it did fill you up 5 times a day, 3 hours apart, hour and a half in between the cleansing drinks. You took some green life supplement. Mr. Irons had the first green food concentrate in the market, and an oil that he combined flax oil with wheat germ oil, so you get both omega-3s and the 6s in a good food base. You took a gel cap of that. You took a little vitamin C tablet, which was pure acerola. He wasn't interested in potency. He just wanted food. It was all based on food. And I don't know if there were any calories there, but there had to be some, I guess, but it'd be minuscule. And then every day you do an enema or a colonic. Well, that was a big hangup for me at the time. I wasn't about too thrilled. I actually had a surgical experience on my feet when I was a kid, like 12 years old. And in those days, they gave you enemas before surgery.
Wow.
And you closed the door in a hospital in the 50s and they had an enema bag in the back of the door. That was horrifying. Altogether horrifying. Uh, and I wasn't too keen on that. So I thought, well, I'll do it without the enemas. So I went 5 days and I was miserable. I never really got into deep ketosis. I was so toxic. I mean, Mr. Rogers tried to emphasize you're full of toxicity. You got 4 elimination organs in the body. The bowels, the skin, the lungs, and the kidneys. All waste is removed from those organs. The kidneys and the lungs are delicate, vital organs. The liver is going to protect them. So the liver is going to dump bile, which is metabolic waste, into the gut, go out with a stool. If that's not efficient and the bile gets looped back, reabsorbed back, the liver is going to dump it through the skin. Because the skin is the biggest, toughest organ in the body. We don't think of it as an organ, but it is an organ, and there's nothing that even compares with it as far as size, and has a very specific function, primarily an organ of elimination. And that's, he said, your body, you're so toxic in the bowel, in your gut, that your liver's, you're lucky, Jim, you have a strong enough constitution, your liver's using your skin. And that's what these boils are all about. And in the summertime, when all your allergies kick in, because you're so toxic, it just gets exaggerated.
Hmm.
Well, it all made sense to me. I went 5 days and it was not a great experience. I really struggled with it. I wouldn't do the enemas, and it was just a major struggle. So, and that was June 21st, because he said, you do it at the change of the seasons. That summer, I had almost like no boils. I mean, it was a significantly reduced. I thought it was a total failure because I didn't go 7 days and I didn't really do the, but still, even that little cleanse, a little fast for 5 days, I was motivated. I thought, man, this is a really good summer. I don't, haven't had one of these since I can remember. So then, in September, I was determined to go the 7 days. Oh, I was just determined. And I got right up against the 4th and 5th days, and I started getting so toxic on headaches, and I couldn't even walk. I couldn't work. And then I thought, oh God, if I call Mr. Irons, he's going to say, the first thing he's going to ask me is, what are you getting out on your enemas? What's happening with your elimination? And it was like, I didn't want to call him and embarrass myself, being a weakling, unable to, I was fearful of the enema bag. And so then I first read the instructions. To lay on your left side, because the rectum goes up and it turns to the left, the sigmoid, the S turn there, and then the descending colon goes up the left side, the transverse across, and the ascending colon, coming the other way, of course, on the right side. The appendix are at the lowest point of the bowel, and the appendix are there because God knew that you had to disinfect that environment with lymphocytes, which are white blood cells. And now we know that the appendix secretes lymphocytes into the lowest bottom part of the bowel. And now we know it secretes probiotic organisms,
Hmm.
into the gut. So that useless appendage is not really a useless appendage, not a mistake, you know. Um, so anyway, and he says, so you lay on your left side, you got the enema bag all prepared. It's a 2-quart hot water bottle enema douche combination kit. You know, you've seen them, everybody knows what they are. If you get one now, make sure it's BPA free because you can get them old style, who knows what it was made out of. You get BPA free. Definitely get the, excuse me, spend the money, get a clean, a good quality enema bag. All right, so I filled it up with like, you know, slightly like room temperature water. He had you juice a fresh half of a fresh lemon and put it in there. And so lay on your left side, insert the rectal insert, open up the valve. You know, you're back here, open up the valve, and just let a little bit of water in. Don't like just open. And that's, I had that, and I was going to say the enema experience I had at the hospital was a nightmare because this nurse didn't know what she was doing. I didn't know what she was doing. And she just expected me to just take in a quart of water, you know, open up the valve, and here it comes. And it was a mess. And that was my remembrance of like, you know, of an enema. But this made sense because I'm working with gravity. I'm on my left side. I let a little bit of water in. I close the valve, take out the insert, and just massage. You just put your feet up in the air, put them up against the wall, you know, the inverted bicycle position, and massage and move the water. Disperse it. Don't let it linger in the sigmoid. Move it up. Use gravity. And I'm still limber enough where I can go up and move and shift to the right side, roll, you know, use gravity, twist. And if you ever want to entertain yourself, go to Google and type in colon x-rays. And you will be astonished at the hundreds. I used to carry x-rays around with me when I gave talks so I could show people how messed up the colon is. But
Mm,
I'll send you the link when we're done. And
yes,
anybody
we
wants
could
to
add it
share,
in the show notes. Mm,
you will, the colon is twisted and distorted and distended and prolapsed. And oh my God, it's like, it's so far off of anatomically correct position that it's a mess, you know, and our diets and the things that we do to ourselves that we consume, the gut's not ready to handle that kind of stuff.
mm,
And then there's a quote from Harvey W. Kellogg, who, you know, from Kellogg's Corn Flakes, who said, you know, of the 10,000 operations performed in my jurisdiction, I never saw a single normal colon, you know, and he was like emphatic about, you know, and then the Royal Society of Medicine in Great Britain put out this article called Death Begins in the Colon, and they go through this lengthy, gross description of all the diseases. And then I'm thinking, you know, this was in the 70s. Colon cancer is the number one cancer in the United States. Now it's number two. Lung cancer has surpassed it. And
wow.
I'm thinking, yeah, and how many people have bowel problems? It's come to think about it. Look at those organs of elimination that Mr. Irons is talking about. How many people have skin conditions? Oh my gosh. How many people have kidney problems? I mean, look at dialysis. It's, you know, it's kidney transplants. How many people have, you know, lung issues, lung cancer, lung diseases, COPD, and, you know, I mean, those 4 organs are the most diseased organs in the body.
Wow.
Nothing comes close. And it tells me logically that, you know, there's something to this toxicity that we have developed through faulty eating, through all the chemicalization of the environment, the chemicalization of the food and everything. Because those organs of elimination, you can go right down the list and nothing compares as far as how many different diseases there are in those 4 organs. The liver, people say, well, the liver's an organ. The liver, yes, makes metabolic waste out of, cleans up the blood, converts it into bile, dumps it into the gut. So the gut removes the bile, the
Mm,
metabolic waste. If the gut's malfunctioning, a significant amount can be reabsorbed, recircled, cycled back to the liver. The liver, if you're lucky enough, like I was, will push it out through the skin. That's really what Mr. Irons told me about what was going on. It made perfect sense to me. I had a really good background in physiology and anatomy at university, biochemistry. That's what I liked.
mm,
And so the second time I did the cleanse, I hit the wall again, day 4 or 5. I did the enema, and I had 2 quarts of water in that bag, and I took over a quart of it, and I just took a little at a time, massaged it, changed positions, dispersed my body. Pressure was gone. Take a little more water. You know, 45 minutes later, I had half of that bag, more than half of that bag in me. And by then, I was working it all the way over to the cecum, which is the right side of the colon where the appendix is located. And I could hear it squishing around in there. You know, it was kind of cool. But then the pressure got so great, I had to jump up, and the waste, yeah, Lauren, the waste that came out of me, I don't want to gross you out too bad, but it was as bad as mucus ropes, fecal stones, debris that had been in me like who knows how long. They were like rocks, cut my rectum. And as that waste poured out of my gut and my bowel, my energy went, whoa. It was the headache cleared. I was like, I felt like I was, well, I jokingly call it my epiphany on the toilet bowl. Yeah. It was like I knew this is it. This
Mm.
I had a breakthrough, literally and figuratively, a breakthrough that was like profound to me, stunning. I earned it, and by doing the fast and following his instructions and all that fiber drink the psyllium seed just kept pouring through, but the waste, the putrid, it was like, man, I'm glad I was living alone in my own apartment because it was horrific,
Wow.
and I felt so good. And I mean, it was like it was a complete transformation. And for the rest of that cleanse, the 7 days was nothing. Just like I just felt like I was in. And then I kept doing it at the change of every season.
Hmm.
And it didn't have to begin on the 21st but right around that time I knew it's like I haven't done the seasonal cleanse yet
Hmm.
for Christmas, the solstice yet. But then I've got a lot of responsibilities taking care of Karen and things. And so it's one of those areas that I'll get around to it. I'll do it. I've changed my attitude about being hardcore. You got to do it this way. It's got to start, man. Some of the old timers said, it's easier if you start a fast when the moon is waxing. I thought, well, that's interesting. But then when the moon is waning, I never even thought of it. And then I applied that, and I didn't really see any difference. But there are so many different schools of thought out there about fasting, and I mentioned one of my rules that is for me, not necessarily for anybody else, but for me, when I'm fasting, I don't tell anybody. As I learned, when you bring it up, oh, I haven't eaten in 5 days, because it was a bit of an ego trip back when I was a kid. It was like, and sure, that's going to backfire.
Sure.
And then people would argue about it, debate it, discuss it, and disagree with you. And it's like, why? I mean, I just opened up Pandora's box, and it takes so much energy, and I don't want to waste my energy. So I just keep it to myself when I'm fasting and cleansing. Um, it's just easier for me to the word contain it, build substance, as opposed to dissipate it with my big mouth. So that's what happened for me. And then when Karen got fed up teaching food industry nutrition at the university, we decided to go into the holistic practice. And we're still working for Mr. Irons. And Karen actually tried to practice as a dietitian for, I don't know, 6 months or so, but nobody's going to call you and pay out of pocket to see a dietitian. And most dietitians were kind of a joke in those days because they were clearly associated with the really bad food they served in hospitals, the junk food of hospitals. In those days was notorious. Now I mean, I see people ordering from menus, and some of the hospitals are like in the gourmet category, with the diet.
Hmm.
That's changed a lot, but in those days it was pretty barbaric. And so she realized, I really don't want to do what Mr. Irons. I want to be like Mr. Irons. So we both felt the same way. And we both had great backgrounds. Karen had her degree in nutritional science. And so we both had great backgrounds in chemistry and biochemistry and physics and calculus and all the stuff you kill yourself in college to do and never use again, right? Um, and so we opened up our first clinic. We were taking a cancer therapy class with Dr. Kelly in Park Ridge, Illinois. And it's like 1977 or so. And Kelly was famous for his work in alternative cancer therapy. He was a dentist who cured himself of pancreatic cancer. And he loved Mr. Irons products. And that's how he got hooked up with him. He was a big user of Mr. Irons products. And then because he cured himself of really difficult tumor cancer, I mean, pancreatic cancer is about as tough as it gets to treat. And so then he had all sorts of his patients wanting to be helped. And pretty soon he figured, forget dentistry. I'm just going to go into this, nutrition field. And he became really world famous. I mean,
Wow.
he was on the head, he was on the front page of Mother Earth News and East West Journal and all the different, health. And then Acres USA Farming Magazine and in Europe. I mean, Dr. Kelly, sometimes you just hit a certain part of your life where things just go boom. And that's what happened to Dr. Kelly. And I got hooked up with him because he was using Mr. Iron's products, and he was also using Standard Process, which is a company in Milwaukee where I'm from, that was another food concentrate. They were all food concentrates, not high potencies. Standard Process is amazing. I mean, the state of Wisconsin classified them as a dairy because they didn't know what else to do with them because they're processing all these foods and organ meats and all different types of things into 120 different products. And Standard's unique, and they've been around now. They're close to their 100th year anniversary. I mean, they're not new. Standard Process has been around a long time. And Dr. Lee, who started and owned Standard Process, Royal Lee is a famous inventor of medical equipment, and he was very close friends with Mr. Irons. So it was another connection. And Mr. Irons would like to come to Milwaukee to visit with Dr. Lee, and so, it was sort of like our interest. So we studied with Dr. Kelly. We received his certification, became a satellite clinic of his. He called himself the Nutritional Academy. And then he would refer people in the Midwest that needed nutritional support for their cancer therapy to us.
Wow.
And so there was a clinic in Chicago that was doing it as well. And we decided to open up a clinic, and we called it Holistic Services, and we spelled holistic with a W because we never anticipated it would be misspelled. I think you probably heard me say that before. But to this day, the word whole is WHOLE. So how they got into this holistic thing, HOL, I won't deal with it. We eventually changed. In the 80s, we started hiring physicians. So we had an MD and a DO, and we developed an IV clinic, and it became integrated. And in those days, we got insurance coverage for a lot of the stuff that we did before HMOs and managed care. And Karen, being a dietitian, she could receive referrals from doctors and get her appointment covered, that kind of stuff. And lab work we were doing a lot of lab work. We were really working a lot with blood chemistries and different types of testing procedures. And so we eventually changed our name to Complete Health Services. I didn't want to do it, but our doctors were begging us because they say, the insurance companies hate the word holistic. They're putting us through so many hoops to get paid. Like, it's like, please change the name. So we did. We changed it to Complete Health Services, but I still have an emotional attachment to spell. And here's a little anecdote that you might enjoy. At the time, there was a Christian lawyer who was speaking to the Christian churches, evangelical and more alternative Christian churches, I would say, but there was a lot of those around. And her name was Constance Cumby. I'll never forget her name because it was such an unusual name. And she was, people were calling our clinic clients and saying, "Are you guys satanic?" And I went, "Whoa, like, am I satanic? Like, where's this coming from?"
Yeah.
And they were saying, "Well, Constance Cumby spoke to our congregation last night. She goes, 'You holistic people, you're using the word holy. You're misrepresenting the word holy, and you're functioning like, satanic functioning.'" And I said, "Really? Well, we spell holistic with a W because, the word whole." And they were, "Oh, well, that's great. Only we can see you." It was like,
Oh, that's funny.
I know, but that was my first, exposure to how holistic HOL. It could be the root of the word holy or hole in the ground or whatever the case might be. But she actually was very popular back in the 70s and spoke to a lot of churches because that feedback went on for like upwards to a year.
Hmm.
People are calling, are you guys devil worshippers? I'm going, no,
You're
no.
like, no.
So where's this coming from, Um, yeah, so those were the old days of fasting. And for
Wow.
Karen and I, we just plugged away. We just did the 7-day fast and got real comfortable with it. And then what happened to me? And well, then Karen, we started having kids.
Mm.
Well, you're not going to fast when you're pregnant. And Karen missed it so much that she tried fasting when she was breastfeeding because she breastfed for 3 years, 3 years, and 2 years. It was a long cycle of breastfeeding. And she just couldn't do it. And the other thing that happened is after a couple days, the babies rejected the milk. They didn't want to breastfeed. So the toxicity, they can find so many forever chemicals and heavy metals in breast milk. And I mean, really, it's sad that such a perfect food for a baby would be so contaminated by our environment, but it is. And so Karen got out of the fasting. I stayed with it. And what I discovered is I just could not drink that cleansing drink. I could do the enemas and it was great. It was, and my allergies completely cleared up and my boils were gone. Zero. I haven't had a boil from that first cleanse that I did when I was like 21 years old or whatever it was, very young. So I just kept doing it and would always enjoy the experience, especially after I learned how to keep my mouth shut and just do it and just build more and more momentum. But the point I was getting at is I couldn't take anymore. My body was saying, "Oh, I want that cleansing drink. How many times have you done it? 1,000. How many pills have you taken? These Green Life, that was Mr. Iron's Green Life, really high quality product. And my body, and so I just stopped and I just went through water fasting. It was a natural transition. And initially I was kind of opposed to it because Herbert W. Shelton was a famous doc who was a faster extraordinaire and he had a big following and they were opposed to enemas and all the things that Mr. Irons liked to do. And I know how much the enemas helped me. But then I realized there's so many different approaches to this subject. And so I basically just went on water fast. And I did enemas. And then eventually I did water fast without enemas. But by then my system was so much cleaner and the whole situation had changed that it's no problem for me. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how it started for me. And right now, we'll do the 7-day fast, that's seasonal changes, and then at least once a year do a 14-day water fast. Because
Wow.
once you're into ketosis, and for me, I've always had extra weight that I can carry. I mean, when I was really, really committed to athletics, I could get it down to like zero, but I can put that weight back on so fast. So I just try when breaking a fast is just as important as doing a fast. You don't want to overeat. And after 14 days, you got to take it easy. Now, Jesus went 40 days. We were talking about that earlier, 40 days, 40 nights. I guarantee you he didn't eat much on the 41st day. He went a couple of olives or something. I mean, because your stomach is so tight and your body is so, you have to ease back in. 7 days is not that long as far as, because I think I mentioned earlier that when I was young, I did everything breaking a fast you're not supposed to do. Chips, burgers, beers, hot
Mhm.
dogs, junk food. I mean, I was a kid, but I knew better. But it was my excuse at the time for being stupid.
Mhm.
I was young and stupid, and I paid. I mean, I can honestly say that there was one or two occasions where I ate so poorly coming off a fast, 7 days, that I thought I might have permanently hurt myself. I was really worried, like, wow, am I going to recover? Am I going to get back to a normal state of function here? But it did. Body is pretty resilient that way.
Mhm.
Now, what's happened is this whole fasting thing has gotten medical attention in,
Mhm.
in a profound way. And it's wonderful to see all the old timers are vindicated. None of them are alive, but all of what they taught that was right.
Mm.
And you know, oh my gosh, it was so the whole medical embracement of fasting and now intermittent fasting has well, it's contributed legitimacy, I guess you could say, to the whole experience, and also accurate scientific measurements of what goes on when you're fasting.
Mhm.
Fasting, water fasting, fairly extensive water fasting, is the only thing known to regenerate mitochondria, for example.
Mm.
Now, well, mitochondria are those little entities in the cells that burn calories and produce ATP or body energy. There's the Krebs cycle. The whole thing occurs in the mitochondria. Um, what happens after? I mean, I'm 74, so after all these years, you accumulate a lot of waste in your tissues and in the mitochondria and in the stem cells and everywhere, everywhere. They're finding these forever chemicals now. That's the new buzz everywhere. In the cord when a baby's born. The whole world has become really seriously contaminated with stuff.
Mm.
So basically, for me, it was just a matter of staying with it and now getting all the scientific recognition that it helps a lot. Still, you have a lot of resistance to people doing it. Intermittent fasting is a great way to introduce it. I never heard of intermittent fasting until it became popular in the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Mhm.
because fasting was fasting. You could do a 1 day fast, a 2 day fast, a 3 day fast, but now it's intermittent fasting because they know that, for example, your body goes into autophagy, AUTO, autophagy, PHAGY, self-digesting, and it cleans house. It gets rid of a lot of debris at the cellular level because I had accumulated a lot of debris in my bowel, but that was just representative of all the debris I'd accumulated all over my body.
Yeah.
Um, so in fact, I looked it up. I wanted to look for a good definition because people here is what I found for autophagy. Can you still see me?
Yes.
As I went over to the computer here, it says, this is from Google, Healthline. Autophagy is a natural self-preservation mechanism whereby the body removes damaged or dysfunctional parts of a cell and recycles other parts towards cellular repair. Autophagy is the body's way of cleaning out damaged cells in order to regenerate newer, healthier cells, according to Dr. Priya Khurana, PhD, a nutrition educator at the Columbia University. Auto means self, and phagy means eat. So the literal meaning of autophagy or autophagy is self-eating, self-cleaning. It's also referred to as self-devouring. While that may sound like something that you don't want to happen to your body, it's actually beneficial at the cellular level, very beneficial for your overall health. This is because autophagy is an evolutionary self-preservation mechanism through, I don't know how evolutionary it is. I mean, I don't know why they threw that word in there, but anyway, uh, a self-preservation mechanism through which the body can remove the dysfunctional cells and recycle parts of them towards cellular repair and cleaning, according to the board-certified cardiologist, Dr. Louisa Petre. Anyway, it goes on, but it takes a while. Now, the book that you introduced me to, let me come back to Zoom here. Okay, that you introduced me to, Lauren,
Mm-hmm.
Fast Like a Girl.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting because what's happening now as the holistic sort of integrated community becomes more and more sophisticated is they're taking intermittent fasting, like this gal Mindy, who wrote this book, Mindy Pels. She's a chiropractor, but she's got a lot of experience and she's figured out ways to attract women to use fasting techniques for their hormone balance. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's so many people who it's more evident in women because they menstruate and it's more revealing, and they get pregnant or women. It's just easier to read a woman because she gives you so much indication, so many indicators physiologically about what might be going on. But look at the fertility crises the United States is in. I mean, we never heard of. I joke with people. I say when I was young, people were trying not to get pregnant. Now, as people are trying to get pregnant because they can't get pregnant, it's turned into this huge business.
Yeah.
Um, and really, what Karen stumbled on this in her practice at her clinic, and she had it happen a couple of times, and then it became our go-to because what we were doing with our clients back in the early days was putting them all on this irons products, 7 day cleansing program, daily cleansing, green life, wheat germ, flax oil, blah blah blah, because that's what we knew. But later on, all that training in biochemistry that we had in organic chemistry and all, et cetera, it really became useful because the scientific community started putting scientific evidence and using biochemistry as the way to construct things so people could understand what was going on. But we knew the biochemistry, so it made it easy to understand that, you look at the Krebs cycle, for example, that's the means by which the body produces body energy, which is called ATP. There's dozens of nutrients that need to be there in order for the Krebs cycle to function properly. And even back when I was in Madison, I'm thinking, all these nutrients that you need, but nobody's ever talking about them. I mean, does the diet really provide all of that? Well, fact is, it doesn't provide a lot of what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fertility issue. So Karen noticed that when she put a couple on a 7 day cleansing program, they conceived. And then we tried it again. And now we know that, the thyroid's involved. Anytime a person's having fertility issues, there's a progesterone relative or a gross progesterone deficiency. Either there's too much estrogen, not enough progesterone, or there just is a low progesterone. You can test, you can dig into all these different areas of fertility counseling, which are a lot of fun because they're so successful. And there's no risk. It's another thing that we realized as nutritionists, that we didn't have we didn't have malpractice. We didn't really have risks. We weren't taking risks with people. Fasting, even then, the only time I would restrict fasting is if a person was on a lot of meds,
Hmm.
and or if if they were pregnant or whatever. But it was most everybody could do some degree of fasting, except if they were taking things that would be problematic. I remember one case where a guy was on Dilantin. Now, in those days, that was the medication for epilepsy.
Mm.
Epileptic seizure. It was very effective. It worked. Um, and I said, I remember his name was Mike, and his wife were both on it. And his wife Darlene calls me and she goes, Mike had a seizure. And I said, Mike, continue to take it. Because I knew where I landed. I said, just keep taking it. I said, well, Darlene, I said, I didn't tell him. Mike's supposed to be taking it. And she says, he is. He's taking his Dilantin. And I went, wow. So then I talked to Mr. Irons about it. He goes, that bentonite, that clay is an absorbent. And in this case, the Dilantin was clearly being absorbed. He said, so if you're working with meds, don't have the clay. The clay is an absorbent and picks up anything with a positive charge because clay is a very, very electronegative substance, almost like negative ions in the atmosphere. Clay has a lot of unique therapeutic qualities to it. So now, in this day and age, with fasting coming into its own, the intermittent fasting has gotten a lot more publicity. But when you really read the hardcore information on autophagy, stem cell regeneration, regenerating mitochondria, you have to be into like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 day kind of a water fast to let the body really do what it wants to do. Get out of the way, and the body will self-repair and self-clean and self-heal to a very large extent. I'm not saying there aren't cases where you need to take things. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that if you're in reasonable health, your body is capable of self-healing to a very large extent. And now they're calling it autophagy, which is the actual biochemistry that's occurring during a fast in the body, where all these cells get rejuvenated.
Wow.
Yep.
Would
Including.
you, oh, go ahead.
Oh, you're on, please.
Would you say that it's better to like train your body and start with like a smaller fast and work your way up to like a 5 or 7 day fast?
Whatever you do best with. I think that's perfectly acceptable. I mentioned Jason Fung, Fung. He's an MD and he's in Canada. He was a urologist, but he has a fasting clinic. He wrote a great book called The Complete Guide to Fasting.
Mm.
Get it on Amazon. And he's a real hardcore kind of scientist guy. And he's all over YouTube. His talks are excellent. Just look up Jason Fung, Fung. And that's his idea. Start with what you can do. You want to try it for a day? Try it for a day. And if you want to go 3 days, but you only go two, so what? You can stop, you can break the fast, try it again. There's don't I was kind of raised in a way where it was like, you got to make this thing happen and you got to tough through it no matter what. And as I got more and more experience, as the decades went by, I realized that sometimes I'll start a fast and it just seems like it's effortless.
Mhm.
And then I'm wondering, could the moon phases? No, never noticed that connection about whether the moon is waxing or waning, but some of the old timers were of that ilk. So why? Why is it so easy? I'm on day 2 or 3 or 4 and I'm just barely, no big deal. On other days, it's like, man, it's a challenge. For some reason, it just isn't clicking. And I learned, stop it,
Mm.
break the fast, come back in a week to whatever, try it again. And that way I've learned to live with myself and my own ego as far as fasting egos. It's not a healthy thing.
Yeah.
So just going with the flow as far as what my body's telling me. And,
Mhm.
and I do look forward to hitting it right, getting a good start. Um, I want to go longer, but in your case or anybody's case, go a day. Here's what happens on the first day of a fast: you're burning stored glycogen, which is stored glucose.
Mm.
In the liver primarily, could be stored in some other tissues as well. That's called glycogen, stored glucose. Now, the textbooks say you should have a 24-hour reserve of glycogen. I don't know how they come up with some of those numbers, but that's what the textbooks say. And so for the first day, you're burning glycogen. I always feel pretty good on the first day. I've never really had glycogen storage problems. I've never had hypoglycemia or issues like that, which some people have.
Mhm.
And the other irony of people that are hypoglycemic, meaning they run into low blood sugar and they crash, is that if they stay with intermittent fasting, they'll heal that hypoglycemia. or if they just weather it and tough through it on a longer fast, in a couple days, when they hit ketosis, and that's when you're burning fat for energy, they feel fantastic. I mean, it's like, and that's how I felt. And I didn't even know anything about it when I first started. But for me, okay, so that's day one is glycogen. Day two is what they call gluconeogenesis in the biochemistry textbooks. That's when your body's breaking protein down for glucose.
Mm.
That's why proteins and carbs both have 4 calories per gram. Because if your body's going to burn protein, it breaks it down to glucose, and that's 4 calories per gram, like any carbohydrate. Um, so but you can only do that for how long? I mean, you can't break down protein for any length of time without running into trouble, put vital organs at risk. So the body does that for a couple days, and then, oh, better switch ketones. Most of us have plenty of fat to burn, and then you stabilize. It's like, wow, it's like filling a wood burning stove with oak and ash, and it burns hot and just burns. And then the next morning, you got red hot coals, and they're ice to heat with wood in the winter up in Wisconsin. And it was, you fill that wood burning stove with newspaper and pine, gone. It's has no staying power. Ketosis really has staying power. You burn fat, it's a slow, energetic, and you warm up. Your body gets warm, goes from kind of cold to warm, and your energy just feels like, wow. Um, you could do anything. You work physically or whatever. Being in ketosis is an absolute delight in my experience.
Mhm.
I heard somebody say just recently that he tests all these people that come into his clinic. He tests them for keto to see they're all on a ketogenic diet. He says none of them are in ketosis. You can do dipsticks and measure ketones in urine, or you could even do blood sticks and you can get ketone meters, etc. But when you fast, that's when you really get into ketosis. And for me, that happened about day 4. The transition day was 3. And so days 2 and 3, burning gluconeogenesis, burning some protein, get through the day, wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't particularly pleasant. But when I would hit day 4 and hit ketosis, that was it. The rest of it. And even when I was a young kid, it was like I'd be on my 7th day of a fast, I'd be feeling so good that I think to myself, man, do I really want to eat again? I mean, I don't, I guess I should, but I'm really feeling good. And that's what kind of motivated me to go longer and longer. And for me, 14 days is all I really want to go. I mean, because but once you're at that point, it doesn't matter. You can just keep going. Um, that's to me at that point, you've done the work you really need to do. And I never really had it, the tricky thing with anorexia, I understand for a person who starts to experience ketosis, they're 14 years old and they feel so good and they just don't want to eat anymore. And pretty soon you're in that vicious cycle. Now, the old timers, I never saw this happen, but what they taught was that you could fast until your tongue cleared. Because one of the things on a fast, because you're doing so much elimination of waste products, your tongue gets coated, you have acetone breath. And that's kind of a sweetness because when you burn ketones, you produce acetone. And that's, you can smell it. It's not bad. It just, you can tell when somebody's fasting that it's, you know, you go through those changes, but it's all very manageable. So this point there, I got sidetracked into acetoning. Just the benefits of ketosis and the things that happen in ketosis are quite delightful. Yeah, and now I'll even do a 14-day fast without any enemas or colonics. So that's kind of, it's not completely fallen by the wayside, but I don't see any need for it like I did at one time. So even the Shelton people, Herbert W. Shelton, the big fasting guru of the 50s and 60s, who didn't want his people doing any kind of enemas or colonics, and I was totally opposed. But now I see, Jim, you got to be big enough to take it all in because there's so many different angles here. And then we were talking about Gandhi. Well, he's the one who kind of put political fasting on the map. That doesn't motivate me. But yeah, Gandhi fasted until the Muslims and the Hindus stopped killing each other, in that transition when India and was split in Pakistan and Bangladesh and whatever. So, and all the, Jesus fasted, Buddha fasted, Muhammad fasted. Now the Islamic fast, the Ramadan fast is you can't eat during the day, but you can eat at night. But to me, that's not going to give you the benefits that we're talking about. That's a good discipline. It's an intermittent fasting, but that's not going to put you into autophagy. Um, well, that would depend on what you eat at night. But my guess is a lot of people aren't being too careful with what they're eating at night. Could be wrong, but that's just my guess.
And as you're fasting, are there like minerals that you're losing or like things that you would want to think about replenishing? Or is your body like, no, what to do?
Well, when you first start, if you're inclined to take supplements or liquid supplements or tablets or green food concentrates or mineral drinks, fine. I would like that's what I learned from Jason Fung. He said, "You want to do a coffee fast? Do a coffee fast.
Sure.
All the coffee you want. If you want to do, well, he never would recommend a beer fast or an alcohol fast, but his thing was there's so many. Juice fasting was another thing that we got real into, and we did 21-day juice fasts. But for me, I didn't. I mean, it was good. I liked it, but the water fasting takes me to a whole nother level because the juices are high in carbs. I mean, there's really no way around that, and you don't really get into the deep ketosis on a
Hmm.
juice fast. Um, yeah,
And then as you're fasting, you're hitting like autophagy and your cells are dying out, getting like, so I assume toxins are flowing in your body.
for sure.
Um, do you need to like get rid of those through an enema or just the water fast after a certain period of time get rid of enough?
Yeah, the Shelton people said your body will take care of it. Iron said help it out, help your body out because all that stuff you got in there, that wasn't put in there by your body. It needs a little help. So his thing was if you really want to have a good experience and help your body out, especially in the earlier cycles of a fast, clean out, get your colon cleaned out, debris. So,
Mhm.
and that was my bent for a long time. And now I'm just sort of like, well, whatever works for you. And with
Sure.
all the intermittent fasting that's going on, like in this case, Mindy, she uses, on a particular program, here's fasting for autoimmunity, days 1 through 5, 17-hour fast, which she says will put you into autophagy. I have found that when a person actually goes into some of these things, really can depend upon their biochemical individuality. It takes me about 4 days to really get into ketosis. Another person would be quicker or even slower. And then she says, okay, that's days 1 through 5. This is for autoimmunity. Days 6 through 7, do a 24-hour gut reset fast so you don't eat once a day. Uh-huh. Here's day 8 through 10, 17-hour autophagy fast. That's day 8 through 10. Then day 11 through 15, 15 hours intermittent fasting. So for her, a 15-hour fast is just an intermittent fast. If you go to 17 hours, she calls it an autophagy fast. And if you go longer, she calls it a reset, kind of a gut reset fast. Okay, and then you go day 16 to 17, 24-hour gut reset. And this is one of her more aggressive protocols, but she is trying to get the immune system up and running properly. Days 18 through 19, 17-hour autophagy fast, and they day 20 to menses, so however long it takes, 13-hour intermittent fast. And then she wants you on the hormone feasting, because a big part of her book is getting your hormones back in tune. And that's a huge thing now because the pill and the various different types of birth control that people have used has really circumvented the normal hormones. And I realize some women have had nightmarish normal hormone type things. And the pill is like, oh, finally, I don't have to deal with all these symptoms. So I'm not begrudging that. I'm just saying that for a lot of people, when they go on the pill and different types of hormone therapies, it takes a long time to get them back to any kind of a normal state of function. I've worked with women who started the pill when they were like young and they're now in menopause and they've never had a natural cycle.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean it's kind of it's wild.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, so I mean the other thing I didn't mention I was trying to get to before I got a little sidetracked and was the spiritual component to fasting
Mm.
because that I had no Mr. Arms never mentioned it to me. He said that you'd feel so good and so powerful that nothing you'd have no fear, you'd have no you'd be at a whole different state. He didn't say spiritually, but I say spiritually because that's when I realized when I was on young and doing fasting that the how good I felt actually lifted me into like a more spiritual type of thought process and thinking and just deep appreciation and heartfelt kind of experiences with myself,
Mm-hmm.
and having a bigger picture about, oh, okay. So Jesus fasted 40 days before he started his public ministry. There must have been a reason for that. It's not covered in the Bible, but and Jesus never really spoke about it after that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
to me, it's a way of getting in touch with you, with yourself,
Mm.
at a profound and magical way.
Yeah. I agree.
Magic isn't the word.
There's a Bible passage about uh the Jesus' disciples were trying to actually cast out a demon,
Yeah,
and Jesus had said, some translations say that he said, "Oh, this one comes out through prayer and fasting." And maybe you were the one that told me this, but there was a study done after a 5-day fast. Someone's seizures completely got healed, and it's
sure.
almost like I think God works body, soul, spirit. And so, like, getting alignment with the body, like, also, and prayer, the spirit, it seems like it's like a tri-dimensional approach to healing. Um, so it's just fascinating. Like, it's mysterious, but I definitely feel more connected to God, if not during a fast, right after a fast. So, yeah, it's amazing.
Well, the ego, the chatter, that I call it now, to use computer lingo, the default program of
Hmm.
our original dialogue, which has been pretty well controlled by the human ego, which
Hmm.
I use as a word in preference to satanic or devil. The ego program, the Satan program, the devil program. That's the default program that most of us have been enculturated with. That's always turning away. And for me, when you consciously choose so a different way of thinking, that's how you undo the ego. But when you're fasting, the ego needs food, it needs entertainment, it needs things that it likes to, lock onto. And fasting just like cuts it off at the knees. So now it's like a whole different type of thought process.
Mm, that's really true, and I find even my like self-control is improved after, and even like the desire for sugar or things goes away off the back of it too, which makes sense. Like you're not craving that um as much, but it's really remarkable. So if someone's listening, it's the start of a new year, they really like health is a goal for them. Like yeah, what would you say where to begin in all of this?
I would say begin with whatever you can manage. If intermittent fasting, which is so popular now,
Mm-hmm.
um, when intermittent fasting first came on, Karen and I would fast 2 days a week. So we
Mm-hmm.
fasted Mondays and Thursdays. That was a good spread for us. 24-hour fast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that would be one approach. Or you could go try a 2 or 3 day fast. But if you could stay with it to the point where you actually went into ketosis, that's when things really start to shift. Before that, it's still kind of like churning. You're burning sugar, glycogen, then you're breaking down protein into sugar, burning that. But when you hit ketosis, everything shifts. And that to me is that you want to get to that point at some point in your
Mm-hmm.
experience with fasting. I wouldn't force it. I forced it on myself because I didn't know any better and I had no coaching. And Mr. Irons told me what to do, and I had the instructions and everything, and I had his phone number. I could call him, although I was more motivated to just do it and stay with it. Um, and there's ups and downs. And I've kind of learned too, don't judge yourself, Jim. If you break your fast, you're 5 or 6 days into a fast and you break it. It's like, well, your ego gets in there and starts whatever. And oh man, and I guilt myself and judge myself, and put myself through all the ringer there, the self-induced ringer, because nobody else was judging me. Uh, and that Jason Fung has helped me with that. His attitude is like so casual, like try it, you know, don't time it so that you're not going to a wedding and you're not going to be doing a vacation or whatever, a birthday party. No, do it differently and see what you can tolerate. because it's gonna, all I can say is that if you get on that path, on the path, and stay with it at some level and keep staying with it, and eventually get to a point where you can get into deep ketosis, try going 7 days, or at least 4 or 5 when you really start to get into ketosis, so that you can experience that other dimension of
Mm,
fasting, which I only experience when I'm in ketosis.
mm, that's so good. And then how do you break a fast well?
Well, if it's 7 days, I would always break my fast on vegetables and fruit until my bowels were moving, because
Okay.
I wanted the fiber, I wanted the nutrition. And to me, I really respond well to vegetable fiber. I respond well to grains too, but I don't like to break a fast with grains or legumes, beans. They're too intense digestively.
Hmm.
Vegetables and fruits, raw. Mr. Irons, his rule was eat half your food raw, and he did.
Mm,
And Karen and I did that for a long time too. Um, I was a 6 month fruitarian. That was tough in Milwaukee. And when the winter came, it was impossible. I couldn't do it in the winter. Um, but and once my bowels are moving, that's what I tell people to eat. Just eat veggies and fruits. I don't care if you cook them or eat them raw, but get that fiber in and the
mhm,
moisture in the water. And of course, you want to drink as much water as you want on a fast, and make sure it's pure water. For
mhm,
me, and I was introduced in the old school, that's distilled water. And there's a lot of people say, "Oh, but there's all these problems with distilled water. It's too alkaline," and blah. And I'm thinking, hey, too acidic. Excuse me. Uh, but I've I've just benefited immensely from distilled or reverse osmosis water, pure water. You don't want tap water. And if you're going to do an enema or something like that, or a colonic with a professional, make sure they're using pure water. You don't want tap water in your system when you're really purifying like that.
so
So
good.
find out, it's an individual thing. Keep it to yourself, or maybe you got a partner you're doing it with or something like that. And if you're really reluctant to go for 2 or 3 days, do the intermittent fasting.
Hmm.
I always tell people you got to go 18 hours on the intermittent fast. Now, Mindy would not agree with that because she's working with shorter terms, but she's 17 is her autophagy fast. I tell people 18-6 is a great way to do intermittent fasting. You got 8, and so if you eat and you got the 6 hours, you can eat twice in that time frame. Keep it 5 hours apart, because if you keep the meals 5 hours apart, you enhance your ability to you cultivate lectin, which is a hormone that is a primary regulator of other glucose and metabolic hormones. And when you're when you eat and you feel really full and completely satisfied and you're not at all interested in food, that's lectin. Lectin determines your fat burning. Uh,
Mm,
and if you want to cultivate it while you're eating, you allow 5 hour minimum between meals with no calories, none, and that allows lectin to get a handle on insulin and glucagon and all the hormones involved with burning calories, glucose levels, metabolic rate, etc. So that so if you have two, so okay, let's say for example, you eat breakfast 7 in the morning, you eat lunch at noon. That's 5 hours, and then you don't eat until the next morning.
mhm.
For me, I would move those. I know I do better if I eat later, but you have to kind of feel out what works for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
18-6 is a really a good. And as far as the way she's timing it here, it's clever. It's unique. I've never encountered it before. And so you'd have to try that on your own if you want to, because if you're already doing 18-6 every day, well, then you've got almost all of this already encompassed, and you could make it 15 or 16 hours instead of 18, or 17 instead of 18. But getting into some kind of a habit like that, to me, in whatever way you're comfortable to do it.
so good.
Yeah.
As we close, any last wisdom for our listeners?
Ah,
I know you have so much wisdom.
yeah. Well, a lot of experiences. I would just summarize some of the key points, which is try it. Don't set up false or hard to achieve goals like I did when I was young. I'm gonna go 7 days, no matter what. You know, 5 days was effective. Even that first time when I didn't do the enemas and I was so toxic, I broke the fast out of desperation. I noticed a dramatic improvement that summer in my severe allergies and boils. So I don't know. I'd say, I would recommend check out Jason Fung on the internet. Go to YouTube and listen to some of his talks and his lectures because he dispels a lot of the myths about fasting that so many people have been. And one of them being that your metabolism slows down when you fast. It doesn't slow down; it increases. So I could fast for 7 days and drop 12 pounds, quick, especially when I was young. Um, well, the last 14-day water fast that Karen and I did, I dropped about 20 pounds. So,
Wow.
your metabolism doesn't just go into hibernation because you're not eating, not at all.
Hmm.
So often we're eating so much more than we need. I know that I've been an overeater all my life, like so many people. More guys, I think, probably than women. One of the things that Mr. Irons said in the talk that our initial talk when Karen came, we were in Milwaukee at a talk he was giving, and there were about 300 people there. But this was 1972, and he said, if Americans continue to eat the way they're eating, diabetes is going to be an epidemic. And then that was the 70s. Now we're in the 90s, and our clinic is doing great. I mean, and we're sitting around talking about Mr. Irons, and we're saying, Mr. Irons said that diabetes was going to be an epidemic, but it's not an epidemic. Well, she had to wait another 10 or 15 or 20 years, and now we have a full-fledged diabetic epidemic on our hands, big
Yeah.
time.
And would fasting help that?
Oh yeah, totally. I
Mm.
mean, yes, because the beta cells in the pancreas in the islets, that's what produces your insulin, for example,
Mhm.
and that's going to be regenerated. The whole every cell in the body. That's another thing about fasting. Every cell in the body is going to be regenerated, rejuvenated. The other thing is that I remember when I was doing fasting, like in my 30s and 40s, and I'd be on the sixth or seventh day, and I'd look in the mirror, and honestly, I'd think, man, you look like you're a teenager. It really has like a reverse aging kind of a quality. Well, if you regenerate your cells, your mitochondria, your stem cells, which make all your other cells, and fasting is established, a proven fact is the only thing that will do that repeatedly under any situation. It's reproducible, which is a big thing in science. Can you reproduce it?
Wow.
Um, yeah. So I think it's the ultimate anti-aging strategy. I really do.
Wow. Oh, well, Jim, thank you so much. This has been so rich. And I feel like those who really love the science got the science and then lots of practical. So thank you for who you are.
Oh
And
yeah, well, thank you for having me, and appreciate who you are too.
yes,
Yeah,
Happy New Year.
yeah. Let's make it a good year.
Yes.